Okay, and proceeding forward. So presenting today's CoEnterprise webinar, we have on supply chain and EDI challenges faced by retailers during COVID-19 are Thomas Minnick and Jennifer Tattenbaum. Thomas Minnick is a senior analytics consultant at CoEnterprise. He holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation and has been an analytics business intelligence consultant working across multiple industry verticals for more than 6 years. He emphasizes visual analytics that reliably produce actionable intelligence. Jennifer Tattenbaum is VP of Product Management for Syncrofier at CoEnterprise. Jennifer's experience includes e-commerce, inventory management, and dashboard reporting and analytics. She has a passion for solving problems and satisfying customers. So without further ado, I'm pleased to turn the program over to Thomas. Thomas, take it away.
Thanks, Patricia. As Patricia said, my name is Thomas Minnick. Just to give you a quick background on CoEnterprise, we were founded in 2010. Our headquarters are in New York City, although those offices are shuttered and have been since March. We're a privately owned company with more than 150 employees, long experience in software implementation with a well-known client list across industry verticals, but with particular expertise in EDI and supply chain. Syncrofier, which is our flagship SaaS platform, is a powerful visualization tool that helps supply chain professionals gain visibility into their own and to their trading partners' data. It helps to resolve problems with orders, shipments, payments that aren't necessarily visible to OMS and ERP systems. Before we dive into the presentation, I want to begin just by expressing my sincere hope that you and your families remain safe and healthy during this pandemic. Our message, first and foremost, from our CEO, Michael Rabinowitz, and on behalf of the entire team here at CoEnterprise, is that our unwavering mission is to support you and your teams during these difficult times. By working together, step by step, we will get through this crisis. By instituting and diligently following strong social protection systems like physical distancing, by concerted effort at all levels of the government, and with the critical support of business and workers, by continuing to put our people and the community first, we believe we will pass through this crisis and return to normal life stronger and wiser than before. With that, I want to quickly recap the experience that we've had with COVID-19 that has brought us to this point and talk about the specific impact on the retail industry, some of the factors that produce that effect, and then give a quick preview of some possible solutions for our present situation. So we've all seen the headlines. The effect of coronavirus has been broad, touching companies large and small across industries, and has represented a major dislocation in the supply chain. So we've experienced apparent shortages of many high demand products such as hand sanitizer, bathroom tissue, and other paper products, masks, gloves, personal protective equipment for healthcare workers. Increasing the supply of these items and keeping the store shelves stocked has proved difficult. And I want to explore why that's been the case a little bit. It's important to recognize that the disruptions have been global in scale, right? We've moved, previous slide please, Patricia. We've moved in waves from Asia through Europe and into the Americas. Non-essential manufacturing has shuttered to comply with stay-at-home orders. And in anticipation of these shortages, we've actually seen consumers engaged in panic buying, routinely leaving store shelves empty of important goods. We think that the supply chain has actually held up pretty well under this pressure, but only stabilizing supply and keeping store shelves stocked for an extended period is going to actually calm consumers and get them to sort of return to their normal patterns of buying. We think part of what is going on here is not necessarily a question of how much, but also, or at least also a question of where are these goods, right? Bare shelves don't necessarily signal that there's a supply chain integrity problem. COVID-19 is changing the pattern of consumption, not necessarily increasing in all cases. And what we're seeing is that consumers are in concern for future supply, shifting the storage function from stores into their homes. So it's going to take some time with shelves full to convince customers that they can return to their normal buying patterns. Now, one of the things that we've observed, there are a number of things that can cause issues in the supply chain. One of the phenomena that we've observed and we think is an important one to be aware of is the response to rationing. So manufacturers are ramping up production of critical items to meet the demand, but there's a critical question that they face: how much should they produce? Purchasing managers, with now less insight both into what they need and also into what they can get, are tending to increase their orders to get just as much of available goods as they can. And so the consequence is that the visibility is reduced up and down the supply chain in a time when we need that visibility even more. So we think that analytics, particularly in this time, is really important. Carefully tracking orders, shipments, deliveries, updating your inventory models, communicating effectively both with suppliers and with customers, all of that is going to be really helpful to keeping information reliable and the supply chain moving. So I want to talk a little bit about what the impact on the retail industry has been, and I've got a couple of slides to do that. A survey by Statista assessed the expected impact of COVID-19 on various industries across 4 different areas, with 1 meaning a minor impact and 5 meaning severe. As you can see, retail was near the top of that list, behind only manufacturing and travel, with effects in the 4s and 5s for personnel, operations, supply chain, revenue, and overall. And we've seen that in the sales numbers, right? So this chart shows the year-over-year sales growth in both March and April of this year versus 2019 over a whole list of retail categories. Looking mainly at April, clothing was down nearly 90% year-over-year. Furniture, appliances, electronics down almost 2/3. Sporting goods were cut in half, basically. Now, there have been some bright spots. Food and beverage stores saw growth. And of course, much buying has moved online, so online retailers have seen a benefit. And one other interesting area, people stuck at home have apparently been working on home improvement projects, as evidenced by modest growth in building material, garden equipment, and so on. And I can include myself in that category. People are visiting stores less frequently, but they're buying more when they do, and they've exhibited a preference for shopping at multi-category retailers like Target and Walmart, where they can get everything that they need in one stop. So multi-purpose outlets like those have seen an increase of about 10% year-over-year. And convenience stores have also seen a modest increase, we think just essentially from an increase in people wanting to make quick visits to get, some maybe indulgence good and then getting back home. So let's talk a little bit about what got us here, and in particular, the effect of just-in-time inventory or lean supply. The lean global supply chain strategy is really a financial strategy, right? It's intended to keep inventory down to the amount that will be needed over a very short time, and thereby keep costs of holding inventory down. Lean supply strategy relies on forecasting based on historical data, and it doesn't typically consider major disruptions to supply or react to them very quickly. So one of the questions that we're asking is now the time to introduce some kind of stress testing methodology? If you think back to the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, financial institutions were using stress testing, scenario testing to try to understand what their risks were and how they would survive, how they would work through a crisis like the one that we're experiencing right now. And so doing stress testing, trying to get measures of things like time to recover, the time it takes for a particular node in the supply chain to be restored back to full capacity after that disruption, and also time to survive, which is the max duration that the supply chain can match supply with demand after the disruption. This kind of just-in-time, this kind of examination of our just-in-time methodologies can help us to understand how to make the supply chain more robust and stable, but it is dependent on reliable data. So would a supply chain stress test have helped us overcome the challenges and shortages that we've been experiencing over the last few months? According to a review to an article in the Harvard Business Review, the answer is yes. We need a stress test for critical supply chains, and there are folks who are working on developing a methodology to do that. And I would note that that article is freely available whether you're a subscriber or not, because it's part of the Harvard Business Review's coronavirus coverage. So with that, I want to hand it over to Jennifer Tattenbaum to talk about some of the improvements retailers should consider.
Jennifer, do you want to take it away?
Sorry, I was muted on my phone.
No
yes,
worries.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Yes, I'll take it away from here. The big thing that we're talking about at CoEnterprise is how important visibility is. In order to achieve business continuity and to manage your supply chain and the disruptions, you need to have a clear understanding of your supplier's side of your orders, even through changes and shipment delays. So understanding your planning and procurement options are key during a Black Swan event. Next slide, please. Knowing your suppliers, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more in a later section here, but you can't sell anything to your consumers without knowing what your suppliers are supplying to you and when. Knowing their strengths and weaknesses, staying on top of their fulfillment of orders, and ideally knowing your supplier's supplier, because that's going to affect you down the line. That way you know which levers to pull if you need to scale up operations or shift priorities during a crisis. And again, this gets into this idea of visibility at tier 2 and tier 3. Collaboration is the most important. I know I'm saying everything's the most important, but this really is, and it's one of our tenets at CoEnterprise. We say that the C in CoEnterprise stands for collaboration because our focus is on bringing data together between businesses. Better collaboration with existing suppliers so that you can understand what's happening in real time. Order changes, substitutions, back orders, shipment delays, being able to streamline the delivery and receipt of goods What if you get a delivery from a supplier and it sits in the yard for a day when those goods could be on shelves a day earlier? The important thing is that this collaboration is going to help you know when goods you've ordered are going to be on your shelves, and to prioritize the partners who have the skills, tools, and knowledge. That means understanding which of your suppliers need some additional assistance in getting up to snuff and which ones you can count on when you need goods quickly and on time. As we like to say, check your blind spots. So to build on that even more, what new suppliers might you need to add? Do you have suppliers in certain categories who really are just not performing reliably? Those are areas where you're going to need to identify new suppliers while understanding the risks of changing a supplier. How long does it take to onboard? How close or far away is that supplier to the selling market? Now, this next bullet point, of course, is in direct contradiction to the just-in-time strategy, but you have to consider holding a larger inventory of sensitive items. Same idea is being able to double source those items that you absolutely need. So holding a larger inventory and double sourcing them. And just simplifying the supply chain in general will allow you to focus on adapting and changing, because it's just not as large a battleship that you're trying to turn around. It's a simple, more streamlined operation. And that will enable you to make changes as you pivot your business. Next slide, please. And as is in our DNA at CoEnterprise, using data to identify your risks and exposure. So this is where dashboards and visualizations that you can share with executives are key, and actually looking at your data to draw meaningful conclusions. Anecdotal and qualitative information is important, but using that to generate questions and test those and get answers against your data is absolutely vital. And even just some of these basic questions: where are my tier 1 suppliers located? What about the other tiers? Which suppliers are most vulnerable in the next extreme event? Are they going to be financially threatened? And what about my critical categories? What are the supply risks there? And if you start planning now, asking these questions, you're going to be much better positioned for hopefully the not as bad next Black Swan event, because I would hope we never have one that's been as serious and all encompassing as what we are all going through right now. Next slide, please, Patricia. So I also would be remiss if I didn't talk about EDI as a golden nugget that can help you as a retailer right now in doing some of the things that we've just talked about. Next slide, please. As we were saying, Thomas and I both, having great relationships with your suppliers is absolutely vital, so that as a retailer, you can have the right product at the right time, ensure your stores are well stocked, because consumers need to be able to buy what they want when they visit. Otherwise, they're going to go to your competitors. And if you aren't getting goods from your suppliers when and where you expect them, it doesn't matter how good your demand forecasting was, how good your planning was, you're still not going to have the goods that you need. So collaboration and communication with your suppliers is key. I may be sharing some bad news that you already know, but in case you don't, your ERP is not the source of truth from your suppliers. Now, I'm sure many of you rely on data and dashboards from your ERP or other enterprise systems. And those visualizations, those dashboards are incredibly helpful. But in an extreme situation, like say a global pandemic, you need accurate information from your suppliers, and your ERP isn't going to give it to you. Any data that's in the ERP has gone through numerous systems and transformations, And in those transformations, details are lost. They try to keep the important details, but in an extreme situation like a global pandemic, the details that you need are from your suppliers are not going to be there in your ERP. So the good news is that EDI is a source of truth from your suppliers. It's the first step in ensuring goods are available when and where they're needed. And we know you may have some suppliers who are smaller, who are resistant to using EDI. It's too hard, we don't have the expertise. It's on you as a retailer to sell them on the benefits, on how they'll be able to reduce manpower to process and fulfill orders, and they're going to gain access to data and insights so they can improve their own operations. And these benefits are going to be even more impactful with tools sitting on top of the EDI so that suppliers, customer service, finance can all themselves solve shipment, order, and payment problems. And as one of our biggest retail customers likes to say about EDI and suppliers, when we do EDI well, both sides win. The key thing about the EDI data that's flowing back and forth is that it's got a ton of untapped value. If you want visibility into your suppliers, you already have it without building special API integrations or negotiating data access and ownership. EDI provides direct data from your supplier systems, communicating everything about an order. It's got the raw data so you can have meaningful reports and visualizations at the executive level and on the ground. So the raw material is already there to be able to analyze prices, lead time, fill rates, and back orders by specific products, by specific suppliers. And it doesn't have to be hard to work with. The thing about EDI, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's designed to be computer readable. It's designed for computers to be able to talk to each other. But there's so much value in that data if you can make it human readable and accessible to everyone in your organization. So you really need to have an easy way to paint a picture for your entire business using this data. You can answer important business questions, gain insights from the data, collaborate with your suppliers, and keep them in the loop so that you can resolve data issues before they become inventory headaches. And most importantly, this data is the key to identifying problem suppliers that are preventing you from planning. They're making it impossible to predict the inventory you'll have on your shelves. That problem needs to be fixed, and you need to know who's causing it. Thomas, I think this is back to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. So how can we help? How do you plan for, as Jennifer referred to them, black swan events, the unplannable events, right? In short, our answer is rely on your data and remain nimble. So not surprisingly, coming from an analytics consultant, I think analytics is critical. And I've worked with analytics for quite a while, and I've seen it help people. So I want to talk about a couple of projects that I've worked on, dashboards that we've built. A couple of these are sample dashboards with mocked up data. But this is one that I've worked on over several years with a client that provides risk data on analyzing supply chain. So we think an effective analytics strategy really is going to bring the power of your data to bear on the biggest problems that you face. And one of those is understanding your supply chain, not just understanding your suppliers, but understanding who supplies them and who supplies them. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on. And getting that picture of your supply chain with that kind of depth can give you a lot of insight as to what the risks are and how you might deal with them. So this is an analysis that I did looking at 3 tiers of supply, understanding how those supplies flow into a particular company, where the risk was concentrated, and what kinds of risks those were. And with this analysis, this is just one of several dashboards that we use to do this. And with this analysis, we could say, simulate a disruption like a tsunami in the Philippines, and understand how is that going to affect our supply in the weeks to come, or in the weeks after that event, right? And what particular supplies are going to be affected and over what time period. Another use case that we built particularly or specifically to understand responding to the effects of COVID on the retail supply chain is the one that you're seeing here. And you can see we've supplied a GIF so you can see some of the actions within the dashboard. And the idea here was to identify high-risk regions around the world based on a high ratio of new cases today to those yesterday. So that's what we call our growth factor. And understanding where the virus is surging and how that affected the products that we were bringing into our company. And then by looking at those affected products, identifying potential substitute suppliers in less affected regions. So this is, again, an example of the kind of analysis that we think can help work through some of these somewhat thorny problems. And another use case that I worked on, this is focused on a communications technology store, like a cell phone retailer, reopening a group of stores in the metro DC area. And even though it's a relatively small geographic footprint, the 17 or so stores that we're contemplating here are operating in 2 states, the District of Columbia, and I think it's 6 or 7 counties. And so working through the guidance of local authorities in each of those areas, and in conjunction with the policy of the company, we pull together a checklist of items that we want every store to go through and complete prior to reopening. And this dashboard helps us visualize that and see which stores are ready to open and what the stores that are not ready to open need to do to get there, so that we can get that nice upward sloping curve as we reopen our business to the public, but do so safely. So let Jennifer take it back and talk about Syncrify.
Those dashboards are really amazing, Thomas. I never get tired of seeing them. I'm just a big data visualization geek, and I've just been really enjoying them, so kudos. Syncrify is kind of taking a different tactic. The dashboards that Thomas has worked on are very custom. They're based on taking data that businesses have available, going through a data modeling and cleansing process, and creating custom views that answer the questions that a specific business needs to answer. Syncrify takes a different tactic, which is, hey, you've got all this data and it's clean enough that it's processing all your orders and shipments and invoicing. Let's give you access to it without all the custom work and the custom headache. So there's no technical knowledge required, no data scientists, no DBAs, no mapping data, no training an AI model, no cleaning data or putting it in a specific structure, and no creation of a specialized data warehouse. It's just taking the EDI data that's already there and giving you the ability to analyze it, visualize it, and solve problems. So I'm not going to read through all those bullet points there, but the main thing is that it will help you see and resolve issues with orders, shipments, and invoices. And I get into some examples, like even as simple things as, am I getting what I ordered, and am I being invoiced for what I got? It makes answering those questions incredibly easy. And the other advantage that it offers is IT can refocus towards innovation rather than data research. It can also promote collaboration with internal teams and partners, so you're all looking at the data the same way, which is the first step in being able to collaborate and solve a problem. And then for retailers, it can also help you with your chargebacks and fee programs for sure. And if you use those programs to try to help your suppliers identify root causes and resolve those issues, it can do that too. Next slide, please. I also wanted to mention that we're offering free access to Syncrify to distressed companies during this pandemic. So if you are interested and qualify, you can go to coenterprise.com/Syncrify and get more information there. And just to sum up everything that Thomas and I were just talking about, it's important to remain agile, to be able to pivot and change direction quickly. And now is the time to review your supply chain visibility and technology so that you can get to know your suppliers and your suppliers' suppliers. Start collaborating efficiently now with your suppliers and partners so that you can plan for that next Black Swan event. Know what the risks are and be able to measure them. Measure which risk is going to potentially have the most impact so you can address that one in favor instead of another one that might not cause as big an impact. And to just reemphasize the point that I mentioned that is totally part of our DNA at CoEnterprise, all of these steps will enable you to use data to support your decision making. And that is what we live by. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Jennifer, for your presentation and your insights. We're now opening the Q&A session of this webinar with the questions that we have received. And I invite the audience, if you have any additional questions, please put them in the chat box right there on the control panel, and I will read them out for you. But beginning with those that we have already, where did the data come from in the dashboard and use cases that were shown? And Thomas, I think those were slides that you showed.
Sure, yeah. So the data in the first dashboard that I showed was supplied by a third party that does risk analysis and provides that as a service. And we were taking that data and visualizing it for their clients. The other two dashboards that we showed both use COVID-19 data is supplied by Tableau and Johns Hopkins. So there is a great data source. There's a COVID-19 data hub hosted by Tableau and vetted by Johns Hopkins that is free to the public. And I recommend if that's something that you think would be helpful to you in your decision making, that you take a look at that. The other data for those dashboards was mainly created for the purposes of demonstrating those use cases, but the COVID-19 data for that was real.
Thank you, Thomas. And the second question is kind of a continuation follow-up to that, asking specifically about the development process for those dashboards and how long did they take to build out?
Sure. The first dashboard was it was part of a reporting suite that probably had originally had 10 dashboards in it, and that took a couple of months to produce. But the other two dashboards were both produced in roughly 2 weeks, probably 8 to 10 days each. The time to value for analytics, at least when we're doing it, can be pretty fast.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Thomas. And now a question on Syncrify. How does Syncrify identify when vendors send defects in EDI? For example, they send a case pack in the EDI that is different than the physical shipment.
So that's part of the reconciliation process. where we are comparing units from a shipment against units that were received. So that would be identified as a discrepancy in that line item. And the tool is configurable, so if that's something that you're specifically concerned about, particularly with a specific supplier, you can configure it to notify you in those cases, or just simply record the data and then be able to report on it. We call it a unit code mismatch.
Thank you, Jennifer. And then another one to you, I think, Jennifer. How long does it take to implement Synchrify?
It takes about 2 weeks. The only work on your end is creating an SFTP feed from your EDI archive. Then we upload a list of your trading partners, your suppliers, and we configure the users. And that's really it. It's very quick. I will say, if there's a lot of bureaucracy in setting up that SFTP feed, then it can take a little longer. But that's more on the customer side than on the Synchrify side. And also, as part of that onboarding, we load up as much historical data as you would like included and as you have available. Again, all in the 2-week period.
Thank you. And I'm just looking over to see if there are any other questions that are here. If you'll give me just a moment to page through these. No, I think that is all that I'm seeing. Are there any other questions that anybody would like to share with the group? By all means, put them in the chat box or in the questions box, and I'd be glad to read them out for you. All right, well, seeing none, I can thank you all for being here. So on behalf of RVCF and CoEnterprise, thank you for attending our seminar today. We will provide a link to the on-demand version of this webinar once the file is available. And if you have any further questions around what we covered here today, I am sending to you on the screen, or putting up on the screen, the contact, which is jennifer.tattenbaum@coenterprise.com as a primary contact, and we will send this all out to you via email as well. Thank you all for being here, and have a great day today. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.